Hello, and welcome to this video on dialects and orthographies. Unless a language is very small, it is likely to have dialects. Different villages, or different groups, will have different ways of speaking.
Yes, people in different locations or different social groups can have different dialects. Dialects can have different vocabulary, different pronunciations, that is, different phonology, and even different grammar. For example, standard British English would call this a lorry, while standard American English calls it a truck. British English would say this is a horse, while American English would say horse. Most grammar of the two is the same, but some types of informal British English would say, "He's got serious about studying," and American English would say, "He's gotten serious about studying." When we say dialects in this video, of course, that is a short way of saying people who speak these dialects. We want to pay attention to dialects because we want an orthography to be both usable and acceptable. All dialects should be able to use the orthography, and the orthography should be accepted by all dialects. We want all groups to be included.
So, how do you start thinking about how dialects affect the orthography?
The first step is gathering information about the dialects of a language. Sometimes this is done in a formal survey. Other times you can find out by informal questions and observation. Some things to find out. First, what dialects exist and how big is each? How much do the dialects relate to each other socially? What attitudes do different dialects have toward each other, both positive and negative? Does one dialect have more prestige or status than the others? How well do the dialects understand each other? What are the linguistic differences between dialects? Differences in morphology and phonology can affect word break choices and grapheme choices. It is good to gather this information at the beginning of a project. This is not always possible, but if the language is large and has many dialects, it will be even more important to find out about the dialects early. Then you will be less likely to need to change the orthography later.
If the differences between dialects are small, then I would think there should be no problem in using one orthography for all of them. But if you find bigger differences between dialects, how can you deal with those?
One very basic question is the goal a unified standard orthography, or is it possible to have different orthographies for different dialects? A single orthography is suitable when all the dialects have a sense of unity of the language. Some communities speaking different dialects want to keep orthographic unity, while others do not. And this is a social decision, not a linguistic one. Sometimes, realistically, a government policy or funding issue will also push toward a single orthography per language. The most expensive possibility is a separate orthography for each dialect. It is the most work and is the most expensive. A separate orthography for every dialect also encourages divisions in the language group and not unity. But if each dialect is proud of their own identity and strongly wants their own distinctive orthography, then, for acceptability, it could work to have separate orthographies. An extreme case was one language in Mexico where every village wanted their own orthography.
What are some other possibilities that keep one orthography for all dialects?
Let's talk about two more likely possibilities. The first is called a unilectal orthography. Here, one dialect is chosen out of all the dialects that exist, usually the dialect with the most prestige. It will represent how people actually talk in one particular dialect. It is simpler and less expensive than the other possibilities we talk about here, so it is probably a good first choice. There are some possible challenges. The linguistic differences between the chosen dialect and other dialects should not be too large. If they are, this may make it less usable. Also, other dialects should have a positive attitude toward the chosen dialect. If not, then it will be less acceptable. So, a unilectal approach often works fine, but it's good to be on the watch for these challenges.
Does a unilectal orthography mean that everyone has to talk the same way?
No. We need to make it clear that people can still pronounce the orthography according to their own speech. For example, one language in Ghana has two dialects. One has H and the other has eng for the same words, such as hago, ngago. The decision was to spell words with H, but the smaller dialect could pronounce that letter as eng.
What is the other main possibility?
The other major possibility is a multilectal orthography. This combines parts of several dialects into one orthography. One advantage is that it does not favor one dialect over another dialect. All dialects have some part in the orthography. The challenge is that it does not fully represent anyone's actual speech, and this may make it more difficult to teach.
How do you decide between the unilectal and the multilectal approaches?
It really needs to be a community decision so the orthography will be accepted. The stakeholders and decision makers need to be involved. It will help to consider all the topics we have discussed in this video. These will include: what about size and prestige of each dialect? Second, what are linguistic differences between dialects? Are there big differences, like different numbers of vowels in one dialect? Third, what about practical issues? Who can be involved from each dialect? What about funding considerations, like printing several different books? People will come up with more issues. It is also good to realize that you can mix these types of orthographies.
What are some other things we need to talk about when we talk about dialects?
There are some other issues that affect orthography and dialects. First, even if there are dialects that do not understand each other very well, are there social-political factors, like government restrictions, that require that these dialects be treated as one, with one orthography? Second, what about languages that cross borders? Different nationalities may have different requirements for orthographies, or different conventions for spelling. Finally, it may be difficult to find the relevant decision makers. If so, how do you discuss and negotiate a solution? As with so many orthography issues, choosing how to represent dialects requires negotiation and probably some compromises. Remember, even if there is a standard orthography for all dialects, people can still speak and write the language according to their own dialect. Telling people this may be necessary to obtain people's approval of the orthography. A standard may be used for official purposes, but people can still write however they like.
So, we see that it is usually a good thing to have one orthography for all dialects. It helps with unity of the language group, and it means simpler effort. If the different dialects consider themselves one group, then it is worth the effort to work out the necessary compromises.